Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. We're going to start off first with a satellite animation from midday yesterday through sunset, and we can see several moving pieces that we need to be discussing in this video. Let's start in the tropics. Down there we can see Tropical Depression 8, which will more than likely be upgraded to Tropical Storm Hannah before it does make landfall somewhere along the Texas-Louisiana coast, more than likely the Texas coast. Across parts of the Mid-South and the Southeast, actually stretching all the way back to central Texas, quite a bit of just storms that are popping on the heat of the day. And some of those storms went racing through parts of the mid-Atlantic, hitting in and around Washington, D.C. up to New York City last night with some pretty strong gusty winds here, and plus some very heavy rain. Certainly brought an end to some of the impressive heat we'd seen early this week across parts of the mid-Atlantic up to the Northeast as well. Much of the midsection of the country got a bit of a break yesterday, just a few pop-up storms, but look at how well the southwestern monsoon is going right now in parts of the Four Corners states. And we're going to talk about California in just a few moments, but I want to show you those wind reports that were coming out of the East Coast yesterday. So in total, 164 separate reports, the majority of them from strong straight-line winds. We saw quite a bit of damage here across parts of the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But there was a great video that surfaced last night of a lightning strike that struck just behind the Statue of Liberty here. And what's amazing about this lightning strike is this is what we call a multiple return stroke. So once a channel is opened between the negatively charged cloud base and the positively charged ground beneath it, oftentimes what you can end up getting is multiple discharges like these. Watch it again here. Ready? I don't know how many are actually in this video because I don't think it was caught at high enough speed resolution to tell you here, but I do know that sometimes these channels can open up upwards of 20 times. So you get 20 return strokes in the same lightning strike. So if you or something nearby you ever get struck, it often gets struck 2, 3, 4 times, not just a single time. Pretty amazing to see that. Now coming back to the West Coast, this was just captured just after sunrise. What's neat about this image over here in California is you can see the fog that often lines the coast here. In fact, that's the pretty famous San Francisco fog, and also one of my favorite cloud decks to study, the stratocumulus layer that's out there just off of the coast. But as we play this through, midday yesterday, a pretty vigorous upper level wave moved through. It's very tight. It moved right through parts of California and Nevada and just blew storms up on the mountains. And you can see how the orographic lift really enhances the convection here. Just a neat thing to see that we're getting storms out here in California as well. All right, over the last 72 hours, last 3 days, we can see what our total precipitation map looks like. Now, I know this is a little bit different than what I'm normally showing you. I'm busy migrating between servers to upgrade the server and get much better mapping services for us. But we can see storms that move through parts of the Central Plains, getting into parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and then much more than anticipated rainfall that came through parts of the Eastern Corn Belt, including southern Illinois, over into parts of Ohio. Didn't hit everybody, but it did come through that area and bringing some heavy rainfall to some places. So as we take a look at this particular map, I'd like to show you the last 2 weeks when we compare things to normal. So when we look at this map, this is percent of normal precipitation. You can see how wet things have been in the Central Plains, parts of the Central Plains, parts of the Central Corn Belt, and they're getting up into parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin. Outside of that, some very dry pockets, and a few that we've been quite concerned about, like this taking place in parts of Texas, and also what's been going on right in through this corridor in Iowa, parts of eastern Nebraska, getting over into southeastern South Dakota. There are patches of drier weather that are in parts of the Mid-South and Arkansas, getting over into the southeast. And of course, as we get back into the higher plains, Kansas, Colorado, it's been dry as well. But in between, some very wet conditions. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to show you a new map. I spent a lot of the morning working on this because I've really been frustrated, as have many meteorologists, with the ability for the forecast models to properly pick up on the convection. It's just as though they're not designed to do this well. And I'm actually showing you what's been performing the best, which is the GFS. Now, what have you been looking at here? I went over the time period of June 20th through July 20th. And what I did was I took the rainfall forecast every day from the GFS model, and then I compared it to what we observed with radar. All right. So everywhere that you see red, that was where the GFS and the European and almost every model, okay, over predicted rainfall. Now you can see places that have been struggling for rainfall where this overprediction has been troublesome, because you might look at a forecast I put out. You might look at your favorite forecast weather app, or you even watch the Weather Channel and you're like, wow, they keep calling for rain and it doesn't happen. I'm talking about this part of Iowa, down here in parts of Missouri, getting over here into the eastern Corn Belt. Get to the south of there, you can see that as well. But then you can also see in blue where the GFS underpredicted precipitation. You know, we had major concern in this area of seeing pretty rapid drought expansion, and instead what we got was some thunderstorms that really just unloaded in the atmosphere with enormous amounts of precipitation. You can also see that going down through parts of Mississippi and Alabama, coming out of Tennessee and Kentucky. And so these thunderstorms have the ability to focus a lot of rainfall, and it makes it very challenging to forecast that, even more than 12 hours in advance. So I wanted you to see what we struggle with here. And I'm going to take these drawings off again, and you can feel free to pause the video and look at your location. Remember, red is where the model overpredicted, blue is where the model underpredicted. Very challenging precipitation forecast so far this summer. So let's look at the next precip forecast. What you got here is from the National Weather Service looking out over the next 7 days, showing us total accumulated precipitation. We do anticipate the northern plains to continue to stay stormy. We will also see a deeper trough that will move through the eastern Corn Belt, changing up precipitation chances over here in parts of the Ohio Valley getting to the Appalachian Mountains. Then there will be a frontal boundary that sits right in through the central plains that could possibly early next week bring critical rainfall to some of the driest fields in the midsection of the country, including that part of Iowa. But you're probably seeing down here what's going on as we're bringing in potentially flooding rains from the Texas coast all the way back to parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama's coast as well. And what's going on there is we have two tropical systems to be watching. You've probably heard a lot about these in the news lately. Let's just get an update. Tropical Depression 8, currently sitting here in the central part of the Gulf of Mexico, will likely be upgraded to Tropical Storm Hannah. And we have Tropical Storm Gonzalo, and we're going to take a look at where both of these systems are going in the near term. On satellite, you can see that these features are not super well organized. And what I mean by that is we're not watching major hurricanes at this point. We have an open wave that is Tropical Depression 8, which could again become Hannah. And then the system right over here, Gonzalo, is very, very small and has been a challenge to forecast. As we look at water vapor imagery, this is going to tell us what to expect. You can see that with Tropical Depression 8, again moving right in through the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico, it's loaded with high water vapor content here on its northern side. You can also see that the upper level feature, right, you'll see it showing up right here, they're not yet fully connected. In other words, the surface circulation and the mid-level circulation are still a bit disconnected. What this will likely do is this will take Tropical Depression 8, again, could be Hannah, and fling it more toward the south, right here toward the Texas coastline, maybe more toward Corpus Christi than Houston. Meanwhile, on the back over here, back in the middle of the Atlantic, Gonzalo, which is quite small, does have a lot of drier air to its north, and Gonzalo has to get through the Lesser Antilles in the next few days, and then it may have a difficult time surviving in the Caribbean, but we're not going to be done watching it just yet. So over the next 10 days, you can see here from the European model the tracks forecast by the ensemble. Again, a Tropical Depression 8 really taking aim here on Texas, although it would be very wet on its northern side coming into the U.S. coastline here. And we've got quite a bit of model spread in where Gonzalo might possibly go. Just zooming in here again, this is again the anticipated track where we're going to be seeing Tropical Depression 8, could be Tropical Storm Hannah. And we do notice that by 1 p.m. on Friday, the National Hurricane Center is anticipating upgrading this to a tropical storm and giving it its name. But as it moves, moving through the Rio Grande River and over into parts of Mexico, that's a pretty interesting trajectory, because a lot of times these systems hit and then they start to track to the north. That would be the typical flow pattern. So we're going to be watching to see where this heavy rainfall comes through. Right now, the operational European model paints a pretty wet picture all along the coast, and because the operational model takes us farther to the south, you see a pretty tough break right here to the north of the line I just drew. I want to let you know we could get more precipitation to the north of that should this track start to meander a bit farther to the north than our current operational European model suggesting. Now we're going to come back and talk about those rains in the plains, in the Corn Belt, and over in the southeast in just a few moments. But I would like to show you what the GFS model is suggesting. Bringing in all that moisture on the northern side of it, you can see it brings in quite a bit more heavy rainfall into parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and more into Texas. But we've got a lot to see here with the eventual evolution of this, because it's still going to be sitting here out in the Gulf for quite a bit more time. You can also see that the GFS is much more aggressive with the rainfall through the heart of the Corn Belt too, as we look out over the next week. Quickly on Gonzalo, it is expected to strengthen briefly to hurricane strength, but generally when these systems have so much dry air to the north and they move into the Caribbean is generally an unfavorable environment, especially this time of year with much stronger trade winds. And as a consequence, it becomes more challenging for these systems to survive what could be a little bit greater wind shear. But I want to keep a close eye on Gonzalo because some of the long-range 10-day outlooks from both the GFS ensemble on the bottom and the European on the top do bring this system possibly through the Greater Antilles, which would be the island of Hispaniola, and then through Cuba. And if the remnants should get into the Gulf of Mexico, we will just have something that we're going to have to pay close attention to. That's all that I want to say right now at this point. Okay, in terms of severe weather over the next few days, today we're going to be watching the northern plains and also the northeastern United States. You can see here that by this evening, we will get very high values of CAPE, that's convective available potential energy, that will stretch from parts of Nebraska clear into Saskatchewan and parts of Manitoba as well. So we're going to watch that area very carefully. Tomorrow, as the front begins to move through parts of the northern plains, this weaker front, you can see very high instability that will stretch from the Dakotas, Minnesota, back into parts of Nebraska as well. Meanwhile, much of the Great Lakes states do have a relatively stable atmosphere moving into the day on Friday. Finally, as we work our way into Saturday, just looking at the next 3 days, it's going to be the northern plains getting into Minnesota that we're going to keep a very close eye on, with scattered storms that will be spreading all across parts of the Mid-South, getting over to the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. So that's kind of where things are shaping up in the next few days in terms of storms. Now let's come back to our model output, and I'm going to go with the European just to give you an idea for this, but remember, the GFS is much wetter in this area than the European currently is. But I want to talk about the probability of at least getting a half-inch of rainfall through the next week. So that's what this map shows you. So to assist us in understanding who has the greatest chances of getting rainfall, we often make maps like this from our ensemble models. So you can see that when you get up here above this color, that yellow color, that you have a 70% or better chance of at least getting a half-inch of rainfall. And for many here across the eastern Corn Belt, this is desperately needed rainfall. And also right here in this section of the central and western Corn Belt, we need quite a bit of rainfall as well. So let's take this and now watch the operational European model and get an idea on where this precipitation is going to be coming through. So let's get this plan. We'll pause it here and walk you back through this. So working throughout the day today into this evening, we can see it again, the scattered storms in this area. And we're going to watch later today for the severe weather to pop late this afternoon this evening, like we talked about here in parts of southern Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and parts of north and south Dakota. Okay, high pressure is occupying much of the Great Lakes states as we work our way into the morning on Friday. But getting into Friday afternoon and evening, remember, we're going to keep a close eye on the potential for some strong storms in through here. Meanwhile, what could be Tropical Storm Hannah is moving down here toward the very southern tip of Texas. And again, a day of scattered storms on the southern side of this high pressure cell sitting here, stretching all the way from the Boot Hill, Missouri, all the way into parts of Virginia and North Carolina. As we work our way into Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, this is where we're going to start to watch the front sag farther to the south. So again, another day of strong storms up here, moving out of the Canadian prairies into the Dakotas and Minnesota. Moving forward with that, this will be the most critical piece to this forecast. You can see the frontal boundary right in through here, possibly bringing early Sunday morning rain to that drought-stricken area in parts of Iowa. As we play this through the day on Sunday midday and Sunday evening, this will be the most critical time period to see if we do get the rainfall coming into the drier fields in this section of the Corn Belt. We'll watch it carefully to see how this all evolves. Remember, I was also talking about this last Thursday, bringing in rainfall this past Monday, and it was a big model failure. So we're going to keep a close eye on this. Going throughout the day on Monday into Monday evening, the front is very slow to progress. So this is what gives us better hope at some decent rainfall for the folks that really need it in this area. And as we play this forward, the front sweeps through parts, well, Michigan, through Illinois, getting all the way back here into parts of the southern plains by Monday evening. And we can see that behind this, cooler air with higher atmospheric pressures building in. So some heat over the weekend, but look at that cooler air clean things out through the middle part of the week as the frontal boundary extends all the way down here to the Atlantic coast. That's a pretty impressively deep front for this time of year. Now, as this moves on through, we're getting out to next week here, let's take a look at what the upper level flow pattern is going to be telling us. So let's just go to this Saturday evening. The heat will build underneath of this ridge here, but you can already see the trough that's sweeping through, keeping the weather unsettled here initially to start our weekend. But then as that trough comes barreling through the eastern part of the United States, the ridge slides all the way back to the Four Corner states. So the warmth will build into the west first, while cooler weather will occupy a pretty sizable chunk of the United States going into next week. As we look out here to day 10, we see that both models agree. Let's keep the ridge farther to the west. So this would indicate warmer conditions spreading here across the western United States, but we still see broad troughing over in the east, which is going to make a frontal boundary sag through the south, keeping this region wet and stormy and possibly cooler than average in the midsection of the United States, which is a major deviation from what we had originally thought about this time period. Before I show it to you, I want to give you an idea on precipitation. GFS ensemble on the left, European ensemble on the right. This is week 2, so this gets us all the way to the evening of August the 5th. Now you can see in both models that from the Canadian prairies down through parts of the southeast, we are trying to keep things on the wetter side. And you can also see the European is much wetter closer to the delta getting over to the southeast than the GFS currently is. But overall, this is still a stormy pattern, and even when it does get a little drier, we're going to be seeing some cooler air. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Now this is a little different what I've been showing you here, but this is the National Digital Forecast Database, and the numbers here represent difference from normal. So we're looking here at high temperatures different from normal. So very warm day compared to normal along the East Coast, and also here in the central and the northern plains. But let's watch this progress through the weekend. Friday's departure from normal, cool in the northwest, cool where the southwest monsoon's going through, but look at the heat that builds into the Great Lakes states this weekend. So this is a lot of low to mid 90s in the central plains here, getting up into Nebraska and South Dakota. It's a lot of low 90s that are stretching in around the Great Lakes states. But as you know, there's a front. Here it comes. Ready? There's Sunday departure and Monday. Watch the heat build west, the heat remain east, but the cold front come through here, bringing in some cooler weather and chances for those storms as long as that frontal boundary lingers. Cooler in Texas as well. So now let's get out to Tuesday and even out to Wednesday. We see that through middle of next week, the midsection of the country sees near average to cooler than average weather while it's warm along the coasts. How long does that last? Well, a couple of different maps here to look at. The GFS ensemble on the left, European on the right. Both favor warming where the ridge builds across the west, and as that trough builds into this area, we can see cooler than average weather, stretching all the way out to August the 2nd here in terms of temperature anomalies. That continues all the way out to August the 7th as the ridge stays west, and we tend to see warmer conditions running along its edge like this, but maybe cooler than average in parts of the south and southeast. So we got something to be watching there, and that could encroach on the Corn Belt too. So from there, what I want to do is I'm going to skip over going through all the teleconnections, because you can just go to my.nutrienagsolutions.com and watch my latest long-range forecast right here, where I talk about El Nino, La Nina, we talk about the MJO, we talk about the Southern Oscillation Index, and that week 3, week 4 forecast. But what I want to finish with is a quick update internationally. We are still anticipating heavy rains where we've seen the flooding in this part of China. But if you get up in the northern China plain over the next 10 days, things are looking drier in that area. The Indian monsoon is moving to the north. It's about right here in the forecast, so still very dry in this particular section of India while they wait on the monsoon to get there. And finally, just taking our attention over to Europe, you can see here that Ukraine in the European ensemble through the next 10 days is showing a drier bias, especially east, but could be wetter in the western part of Ukraine. And the temperatures finally starting to rebound up to above average in that particular region as well. So hope you found great perspective in this video. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.